All right, let's do this real quick before we move forward. Is get our clap in.
Okay.
So we'll do it on 3 and 1, 2, 3. All right, that gets us close. That's all I need is just a quick final. Hello, good people, and welcome back to Street PX, a photography podcast. Thank you for listening in, and this is our part 2 episode of a 2-part special with documentary photographer Stephen Somerstein. If you have not listened to that previous show, definitely take this moment, hit the stop button, and go back and give it a listen. You don't want to miss a single minute of this. This show, we're going to be continuing our discussion about his time at the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, his portraits and photography of the most iconic civil rights leaders of our history, and not to mention his battle with Paramount when it comes to the movie Selma and their use of his photography for the conceptual art, which actually turned out to be a nice compromise in the end. Beyond that, we want to throw in a plug for an amazing friend of our show, Christy Lewis. She has a gallery exhibit going on at the Harvey Milk Photo Center called Best Photo. That's going to be opening up on March 2nd and going until March 22nd. And you might recognize that name if you've been a long-time listener. Emphasis on long time, because Christy was one of our first guests whenever we started this show. That's episode 4. So go way back into the archives there and give that one a listen. It was a lot of fun. We also want to drop in a teaser for our upcoming episode with documentary photographer out of LA, Robert LeBlanc. Robert is a skateboarder, documentary photographer, and so much more, but with that type of access, Robert has photographed some of the darkest recesses of our society, and he does it in a way that shines a light on things that we otherwise like to ignore, but should not. And you don't want to miss this show. It's a lot of crazy shit that we talk about, and that's going to be dropping there on March 12th. Most importantly, we want to give some love to our amazing sponsor, Glass Key Photo. You can find these guys over at 1230 Sutter Street, open 7 days a week from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m., and that's handled by 2 of the greatest guys in the Bay Area, Matt and Gordon. Now, I did talk to them over the weekend here, and they informed me about an event they have coming up called Photo Gods. That is a zine and book fair, so for all of you photographic zine fans out there and makers of zines, this should not be missed. They do have some tables still available, and they're renting out that space, and you can find out more information by going and checking out glasskeyphoto.com. Last but not least, for you wonderful supporters out there through Patreon, we want to offer a huge thank you. You help us make this show as great as it can possibly be. And if you're not a Patreon subscriber and you would like to help support our show, go over to patreon.com/StreetPX, and you can give $1, you can give $5, whatever you're comfortable with. You do get rewards for your contributions. So everything from a print to a photo review to t-shirts to even a ringtone of our wonderful theme that just bores right into your brain. These things are at your fingertips. So yes, definitely check out patreon.com/StreetPX. You can also take a look at our merchandise store at merch.streetpx.com. Pick up some t-shirts. Let's see, iTunes reviews, gold stars, all these wonderful things help our show get into more ears out there in the world. So enough of all of this. Let's go ahead and sit back and listen in to our part 2 talk with documentary photographer Stephen Somerstein. Want to give a really quick 1 or 2 questions on the Selma movie. Now, your imagery from this event did not see the light of day for all this time, because you went into physics, you focused on your career, and it wasn't until the last couple of years, right?
Let me do a quick summary of how it came about. I was in the last few years at Lockheed, and just ready to kind of go back and start pulling my work out. I was at the home of Jim Marshall, and just apropos of conversation, he says, "Hey, Steve, there's going to be a civil rights exhibition at San Francisco Art Exchange. Your work ought to be in there. It's good stuff." I said, "Well, that's nice." He said, "Wait a second." Gets on the phone, calls up the owner, Theron Cabrich, owner of Art Exchange, says, Theron, Steve has some really great civil rights shots. He's coming over there. You're going to like it. Literally just hangs up, and that's it. He says, go.
Now, immediately.
So I go over there, with a bunch of the prints, and they took 24 of them. I was the largest contributor to the exhibition.
Wow.
And not only that, but I helped them along a little bit because I'd been doing a lot of research working with also the Martin Luther King Papers project at Stanford. Dr. Claiborne Carson, who heads up the Institute, the Papers Project, the Martin Luther King's family has, given him that section of the papers to work on. And anyway, I've been working with him on what was significant because I was helping him, giving him photographs that he could use. So it turns out that one of the people who works with Claiborne is a guy named Clarence Jones. Clarence Jones is Martin Luther King's lawyer, personal lawyer, and he's still around. And he was around, those, whatever it was, 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago when I was having my exhibition. And I had met Clarence, very smart, witty, knowledgeable guy. And I said, would you be willing to come up and give a talk before the Civil Rights March exhibition?
Yeah.
It had Obama in it. It had King. It had a whole series of things in it. And so he came up, and he was at Stanford at the time. And he gave this fabulous talk about his experiences with Dr. King and being his lawyer, and also helped with some of the speeches and things. And so that was a marvelous, opening view of my work and then connecting directly with Dr. King through that. Now, what happened, what I haven't even covered is how I had the big exhibition in New York at the New York Historical Society. And I'll give you a quick thumbnail on that. The school had called me up one day out of the clear blue sky. They knew I was one of the major photographers at that time. The school did not have much photography in their own archives. And I get this call one day from the media department and saying, did you happen to have any photographs of Dr. King giving the commencement address in 1963 at City College? And at that moment, when I got that call, I said, 63, Dr. King? I don't know. It just didn't come across my mind. I was trying to think. And then I sat down and said, wait a second. I was head of the photo club. I was editor of the college evening newspaper. If anyone photographed it, I had to have been there. I mean, I was just working backwards in my mind. I better go through my files. So I opened up some of the boxes I have, and I start going through it. And all of a sudden, this envelope comes up, white envelope, with strips of negatives in there, and it says, commencement address, 1963, City College, Dr. Martin Luther King.
Oh, wow.
I open them up, and there are these fabulous little negatives of King. I was right on the stage with him, behind him, to the side of him, covering all the luminaries.
Right.
And I quickly scanned the negatives and popped them off to New York. And they said, what else you got? And I said, well, I covered the Civil Rights March in Alabama. That's how it began. And they said, send us some shots so we can see. I sent them a few shots, and they said, we want to have an exhibition in our media department. We have an area here, which is right next to the president, or the chancellor of the university. He's right down the hall. Could you put something together? I said, you pay for the printing, I'll get you a nice exhibition. So over the next month or so, scan all the negatives, and we produce, 20 or 30 nice prints, ship it off to them. And they say, oh, it's going over gangbusters. People really love the images. And then one day, I get this call from the head of the media department at the college, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, who's now head of the department. And he says, an interesting thing happened. A former dean, what's it? I'm trying to think of her name right now. Can't think of it right now, but she's a former dean of City College, and she's now head of CEO of the New York Historical Society. And she had come by to see the chancellor and walked by and saw the exhibition there. And she says, I want that for my museum. So they give me the phone number of the chief curator of photography for the museum. We talk, and all of a sudden, I have an exhibition at the museum, a real full-scale exhibition. And so that's how that took place. And that was fabulous. People from all over the world, the New York Times, the London Times, French newspapers, everyone, somehow they were...
Somebody knew, somebody was saying,
They had great connections, let's say, in the PR business. Because all of a sudden I was doing Skyping all over the world.
Just making the rounds.
But it wasn't audio. A lot of it was video Skyping. I had set it up in my living room with pictures. And that went fabulously. And then just as that exhibition was going to take place, I get a call from Elton Johns and his foundation. He has an AIDS foundation, and he's raising money. And he says, we'd like to have one of your photographs in our auction to raise money for the AIDS Foundation. I said, great. And why don't you send your people to come by? My exhibit was just beginning to open up at the museum. So they came by, and they selected the Martin Luther King,
Of course,
And I said, we'll cut a deal. And I'll have someone else do the negotiating. I had a friend of mine who was the former director of the Achenbach Library at the Legion of Honor and the Young Museum, and he's a great negotiator. And I said, Robert, this is Robert Flynn Johnson, I said, you do the negotiating. Let's see what we can get out of this thing if we donate, the picture. And what we got out was 2 tickets to his Oscar party that he has in Hollywood at the Oscar night. And I said, they're like $3,000 tickets. They all go to foundations usually. So I said, that'd be nice. So we made up a 40 by 60 inch print of Dr. King for the exhibition. And we're there that night watching the auctions go, and there was a few other photographers before me, and their work went for $30,000, $40,000, which I thought was that's pretty good. And then my photograph came up, and they had an auctioneer from Christie's doing professional auctioneering with a nice British accent. It was marvelous to watch. So they opened up the bidding, and it started at $70,000.
Wow!
And then started going up, and I'm sitting there with, there's my wife who's trying to take some pictures with her iPhone of what's going on. Then there's on the far table is my L.A. dealer, David Fahey, sitting at a far table, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, watching this go on. 70,000, 100,000, 125,000, 150. All of a sudden, ends at $225,000.
Wow.
And I go, am I hearing this correctly? I said, this is one of these out-of-body experiences you're having. You're saying $200,000, $250,000, and I'm looking. I go over there, and there's my dealer, at the far table, David, and he's going.
I can see him
wringing those hands.
Well, we knew that an auction is not the same thing as selling, but it's a nice benchmark.
Yeah, it sets a precedent. I mean, it sets a standard, something that you can know, okay, there is a want for this.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Which again, I don't mean to fast forward this. It's just, it moves us to Selma had picked up the movie, the directors and all those that's putting together.
Now, what had happened there, let me get closer here. I'd been into, first thing, the Selma movie did not start with Ava Devore, which is the actual final director. Prior to her was another director. I can't think of his name right now.
That's all right. That's what show notes are for.
Yeah. My brain is always working full tilt. But another black director who had the original idea for the Selma movie. Mm-hmm. But he was involved in so many other movies that this was just one of the movies that he was working on. And Jim Marshall had told me about that he was planning on the movie. This was a couple of years before. Mm-hmm. And he says, you ought to get in touch with them. They'd be interested in seeing what the real event looked like for just the design and layout and everything. Yeah. So I had gotten in touch with their office, and I had sent some samples of the pictures and said, we ought to get in touch. And if you want to see what the whole event looked like and what Dr. King looked like and, mm-hmm. and what the people looked like in the background. So we had a kind of exchange of information. And they said, we'll get back to you, type of thing. They saw the stuff. They said, very nice. We're still working on the planning of the movie and we'll get back to you. So a year goes by and you're waiting and, you don't hear it. And then all of a sudden I hear that he's no longer producing it. It's gone over to Ava Devore. So I tracked down her people because I have no idea whether they transferred any of the information that I had given them. So I sent off to Devore the same thing, and said, here's some of the photographs. And I sent over a group of them. And I said, we ought to talk about this. And they came back saying, oh, we like your stuff. We'll get back to you.
We'll call you.
And then, a month, 2 months go by. I send a note saying, what's happening? I have more stuff. I talk to you further. We have to negotiate about this. Nothing. They say, oh, we've sent it on to the producer. He'll get back to you. Never gets back to me.
Production's continuing. Yeah.
Production's going on. And then finally, I realized they're getting close to, actually a debut of the movie. Premiere, And I send them another note. Nothing back. Finally, the movie is coming. And what they're doing is just some previews are showing up. And I happened to be at the Jewish Museum. There was an exhibition of Karsh, the photographer there. Mm-hmm. And I had gone for the opening. And I ran into the San Francisco Chronicle reporter, Lea Garchick, who it turns out I have a connection with because she, 50 years before, had been my secretary at the Harvard College Observatory when she was putting her husband through college, and she was working. But we didn't know that at the time, that she was going to be Lea Garchick, the San Francisco Chronicle commentator. But, we found out years later, and we joked about that. Anyway, I run into Lea at the opening, and she said, and she knew somewhat about my work. She had, I'd shown her a little bit of it, and I was working on it with, to sort of get it out. And she comes over to me and she says, "Have you seen the preview of the movie?" I said, "No, I haven't." She says, "Go home, turn on your computer, and take a look. You'll find it very interesting," which I do. I go home, turn it on, and there are my images taken from my photographs, reproduced on the screen. The guy's moving behind King's face. It's exactly, they copied it exactly like that. Also, they had taken I'll show you, the photograph of Dr. King and then mixed it up with the troops there's the shot.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah. Now.
Here it is. Yes, I was going to ask you about that. It looks like it was they reproduced it.
Yeah, this is, of course, the Selma poster that they created. Some of these are 50 feet high and everything, enormous. And they took basically that shot of King with this is the actor.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is no shot actually taken of King in front of the troops. They took another set of troops and they superimposed that.
Yeah.
King, in actuality, the only person who this photograph might replicate is John Lewis, who did face a line of troops like that, and you might have been able to get a photograph something like that.
Yeah.
But this itself with King never happened.
And they truly just combined your Joan Baez picture with the Martin Luther King one.
Exactly. It's an interesting fabricated shot.
Well, you made the director of photography's job easy, didn't you?
Yeah. Well,
But
anyway,
this is without any approval. This is without any completion.
Right. They never got back to me.
Right.
And they never discussed it. So I decided it was time to have a little discussion with them.
Of course.
And I called up a friend of mine who I knew who was an intellectual property lawyer, retired, but he had been somewhat well known in his field. Called him up and I said, here's this. And I send him essentially this set of pictures. And I said, "Do we have a case?" And he said, "You certainly do." And then he brought in an active intellectual property lawyer, from a regular firm in San Francisco. And we got together and talked. And I said, "Look, I'm not in this thing to, make a lot of money off of their little faux pas on this. I want to get something reasonable out of it for the use of my pictures, and I want to make sure that we're not going to try to extort them because of that." Yeah. Because what I know happens in this case, it turns out I did my own research. The people who released the movie was Paramount Studios. They have lawyers on retainer that could keep you in court forever, just keeping it going. And all you're doing is running up lawyers' hourly fees.
Right. Stalemate over a win.
Right. You're not going to win on this one if you do it that way. So I said, what we want to do is figure out what we're willing to settle for after I pay my lawyers the fee, and work backwards and say, here's our starting point, and then let's see how we can negotiate to a point that I had decided I'm willing to settle for in advance. So we all worked this out. They did the research to figure out who they had to essentially litigate with. It turns out it's the people who release the movie, not the people who make the movie. It's the movie business is a very complex business with money coming from different places.
Oh, they make LLCs and corporations for movies to only go bankrupt later, so they don't have. It's a game.
You got the whole picture. But we knew that Paramount were the people to deal with, so immediately they get in touch with the intellectual property lawyers at Paramount, and I essentially get them to transmit that we're willing to work out a mutually agreeable arrangement, that this is not going to be an adversarial situation, but one in which we will compromise and we'll give them some inducement to settle for a reasonable price. One of the inducements is, which works to my benefit, is I said, if we get a settlement that is agreeable, I'm willing to give you any 10 images that I have in my collection from the Selma March, and you can put it in your video discs, your Blu-ray video discs.
Oh, yeah, the bonus material.
And I will not charge you extra for that. That's freely given, that you can put it in there so you can say, we have original photographs in the Blu-ray from the Selma March, which they could not do any
There's
other
no way they could.
Right.
And they thought that was a great idea. So they went off and they came back and they gave one offer. We went back with a counter offer. We'll get back to you with another one. And basically what it did is went
slowly came to the middle.
Like this, and we came to exactly the point that I expected.
Okay.
It turns out, it was exactly, because I had sat down with my lawyers of what are you going to charge me?
You got it all put together,
that, the whole thing, and it worked out exactly where we expected it to be. And the guys at Paramount were just pleased as punch.
And everybody walks away happy.
Everyone walked away happy. You get a Blu-ray, you get my images in there,
See, that's a rare moment.
And I didn't have to, screw them to the ground and say, I want on every photograph that you publish, I want a logo. You
didn't play the hardball.
I didn't play hardball because it was out of, the horse is out of the barn.
Right.
It's running.
Now, beyond even just the settlement and everything, you got an Emmy in the process of this. Am I right?
Yes.
In thinking that?
Well, that was rather amusing, actually. The Emmy. Let's see. I got one.
We got some paperwork here.
It is.
Oh, you didn't want to bring it with you, huh?
It's on a top shelf somewhere.
I don't blame you on that. I love this. I'm sure that thing's pretty damn heavy.
It is. As a matter of fact, a very good friend of mine who I knew from my days at Lockheed, he has a plating company that does all the Oscars.
Oh, okay.
So when he saw this, he said, hey, you want to send it to me? We'll replate it like we plate the Oscars. And I said,
which is true. That's true.
I know it could be very good, but, we'll leave this alone.
What category was that?
It was video. It was a video. As a matter of, I sent you the connection for that. It was
for our listeners, so that way they can know.
New York Oscar, New York Emmy on the video category.
Academy Awards for the video.
Yeah, right. And that was kind of
that's
neat,
fantastic.
And.
I just love this picture of you holding this thing. You're so proud. It's like,
oh yeah, I took the picture. Set it
a
up.
Selfie.
This is literally a selfie.
Yeah. Yes.
I had set it up, put it on a tripod. Anyway, and then we have. Here's a nice little letter.
Oh,
what we got here? One. So this one's. Oh, this is from the White House from Barack Obama.
Yep.
Holy shit. So, Do you mind if I read it? Is it okay if I read it?
Sure.
So this is a letter. It says, Dear Stephen, thank you for your moving photograph. As an admirer of art in all its forms, I was touched by your thoughtfulness. Progress in America has not come easily, but has resulted from the collective efforts of generations who challenged our country's conscience. Those who marched, those who stood firm, and those who sat in. Each of us has a role to play in creating a better world for future generations, and I trust you take pride in your commitment to capturing these acts of heroism and documenting this important history. Again, thank you for your gracious gesture. I wish you all the best. Sincerely, Barack Obama. Oh, I feel proud just reading that.
Wait, let me touch it.
You want to touch it?
From the White House.
It's not this is a copy.
Oh, man, no, that's all right. I'm touching
This is a well-traveled copy, though.
It's a well-traveled copy.
I mean, the crease marks, I mean, you could definitely, I would say that I would think that was original, except for I saw you just kind of move along the seal.
No, the real one is embossed.
Right.
To feel it.
That one's mounted right above the Emmy, right?
It is.
And it is time to throw some love over to our sponsor, Glass Key Photo. Located at 1230 Sutter Street in the heart of San Francisco, this is the Bay Area's premier location for all things analog, from repairs, cameras, lenses, film, both the brands known and the weirdly unique, shit that you've never even heard of. That's the place to go and check out. You can also pick up zines made by local artists from right here in the Bay and help support that world. They are open from 12 to 6 every single day, ran by two of the hardest working guys in the industry I know, Matt and Gordon. And, whatever you're looking for, this is a place to go and check out when it comes to film. Even if you're not from San Francisco, next time you're visiting, go and check it out. So yeah, again, that's at 1230 Sutter Street, San Francisco, California, and much love from Street PX to everybody over there at Glass Key Photo.
The thing is the Martin Luther King photograph has taken on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, these images, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
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 It really does kind of become its own entity, its own individual.
It is. And interestingly enough, it has had a profound effect on many people's perception of that point in history. And it reminds them of a time of great idealism.
Mm-hmm.
I like the photograph, but I am, to be honest with you, absolutely surprised at the effect it has on people's remembrance of that time of history, and that I've sold many of these to lawyers who want to be reminded of that time and place. And
it never seems to be our favorite images are the ones that catch viral. It's always the left field ones.
Sometimes you just never know what's going to touch people.
Right.
Yeah.
What I tend to think of as the symbolic picture, like my things go better with Coke, I love very much because there's a lot of little elements in it that came together.
Yeah.
The King photograph is a beautiful image, but it is so almost like a piece of abstraction.
Yeah.
That, I like it, but my heart is in one place. It's like having children. And which is your favorite child?
Right.
Yeah.
You kind of have one, but you don't want to admit it.
You do. And what amazes me is how much this photograph has become symbolic to so many people. I've been to places like the Indiana Black Exposition in Indianapolis, in Indiana. And, the people would just stand in front of the picture as if they were trying to absorb that feeling from 1965. My dealers are remarking to me, and I do ask them sometimes when they're willing to tell me who is, not by name, but what kind of people are buying that image. And I have found people from lawyers and businessmen, even billionaire intellectual, what should I say, billionaire, techie, presidents of companies have bought it, and mothers who thought their daughter ought to have a nice picture on the wall of their college dorm room.
Oh, so it's like
wow.
two different complete areas of expression and interpretation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And but each of them see it as reinforcing an idealism that they have in their own mind of what they think of as this better world that existed back then when thousands of people came together to march, for voting rights. And in a sense, they want to feel that this could come again. Mm-hmm. They want to be reminded of that better time. And I think that's why the picture is so even more symbolic today than it would be if Hillary Clinton had won. Mm-hmm. I suspect, though the picture would be important, I think it becomes even more important in times of stress and difficulty in the country, that we're reminded that there can be better days, that there are people who have been here who have drawn from the best of what America has to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
No, that's greatly said.
Yeah. Well done. Hey, let me ask you a couple of questions here. Mm-hmm. And this is what I'm very interested, especially when we're looking at today, when you have this new generation of photojournalists going after, Donald Trump has given us a lot to shoot lately. There are a couple of quotes that were attributed to you that I found were very interesting, and I wonder if you could talk. They're simple quotes. One was that you can have a great photographer, but you need an editor. Could you expound on that?
Well, what I have experienced is that there are great photographers out there. There are talented people, but a photographer is not going to see the public eye if you're a magazine, if you're a newspaper, unless you have a good editor who not only recognizes the image, but knows how to present it properly. If you take a look at magazines that have undergone changes like Life magazine, before they went from a weekly to a tabletop monthly, they had one set of editors who were the original old editors with the classic, beautiful black and white and color images that we recognize as great Life magazine photographs. Then they retired the magazine and they brought in new editors to create this tabletop, and the pictures just weren't there. Mm. The newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, 10, 15, 20 years ago, had great picture editors, and you could open up the newspaper and you would see really great photographs in there, drawn from Associated Press or Getty or whatever. And then the newspaper underwent a contraction, and they hired newer people, younger people, less expensive people. Mm-hmm. I did not see the quality photographs showing up. They were competent, but they weren't great. Mm-hmm. Difference between a great gallery that has a great director in it. I have a gallery in New York, and I have a number of galleries around the country. My two favorite galleries for producing books are my L.A. David Fahey in L.A., and Howard Greenberg in New York. Both produce books. When I see how he selects photographs for those books, both of those gallery people are spot on. When I go to other galleries to produce a similar subject, like what am I thinking of her name? And they discovered her work in Chicago.
Vivian Myers.
Vivian Myers.
Yeah.
Howard Greenberg handles Vivian Meyer's work, and he produced a book out of that. There were other galleries around the country that produced books. When I put them side by side, I knew immediately which was in the hands of Howard Greenberg, because Howard has a great editor's eye. He knows how to choose which are great photographs and which are okay photographs. A lot of other people don't have that sharp eye, that distinguishing characteristic. When I was growing up, some of my great idols were Magnum photographers, Cartier-Bresson and other people from Magnum. And I used to pride myself on being able to open up a New York Times and pick out the photographs which were Magnum photographs before I even looked at the logo on it. I would know immediately that's a Magnum photograph. They were so distinct and so unique and so brilliantly conceived. This is no longer true. You know, the editors are just not as good as they used to be in selecting it. Perhaps Magnum doesn't quite have the photographers they used to have either. I don't know. But I can really spot a great editor. And if you don't have a good editor, no matter how good your photographers are, it won't see the light of day.
True.
Because they're the final arbiter of what gets into the magazine, what gets published. And so being that they're the gatekeeper, no matter how good your work is, it has to go through them. And unfortunately, magazines and newspapers do not spend the money to hire those quality people.
That's truth.
Yeah. Now, just tacking on to that, my second question,
yes,
which is another quote that came from you. You said, I think newspapers could do a lot better to seek better composition and better pictorial journalism.
Oh, yeah.
What do you?
Well, the problem today is because of the, this is combined with having a good picture editor, is they're buying, apart from the shots they do in their own town, they're buying from Getty or they're buying from Associated Press. And I find quite often they're just filling up with pictures, but they don't spend as much time making sure that it's the best possible picture from the selection that they have, or it's cropped the best possible way. I sometimes feel that the newspapers are just filling in the photographs to getting okay photographs, and they're not composed and work with the story as well. Having good photographs is one thing, then integrating it with the story so that they reflect on each other. That takes a little extra talent. The New York Times is doing fairly well. Washington Post is doing fairly well on that. Unfortunately, I don't think the Tribune people who own local newspapers here, the Chronicle and others, are really newspaper people. I think they're businessmen.
Business people.
You know, and I think it shows. If they really were good newspapermen, I think the newspapers would be a lot more attractive, much more informative, and the pictures are only part of it, but it's integral.
Investigative.
Yeah.
A little bit more focus on getting to the bottom.
You know, it can be better. The talent is out there. Utilizing the talent is the key thing. You know, I see great photographers out there, very good young people developing, but unless they work with, editors train you.
Yeah.
You know, I was self-trained, but I looked at great work and I studied to see what was it that made those great photographs.
Whether it's training, it's mentoring, it's inspiration.
It would have been a little faster for me if I had someone who I worked with. Instead, I had to learn on my own. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I just want to come off of that and just see where people can find out more information about you and your work. Okay.
Certainly, you can look at my website. If you want to see some of the images here, you just go to the standard www.somerstein.com, SOMERSTEIN, and you'll be able to link in to see some of the civil rights photographs. In San Francisco, I have several dealers here. One is the San Francisco Art Exchange on Geary Street, and the other one is Modernism Gallery on Ellis Street.
Excellent.
And both of them handle my work, and both of them are great advocates of good quality photography.
And people can pick up original work from these areas too.
They do have original work there, and if they're not in their
they can
gallery, they can order it.
Fair enough.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, they can get onto my website and, get my email address and query me. It's Somerstein, @gmail.com.
Fantastic. And we'll put all these links also into the show notes. So for anybody out there that's looking, streetpx.com. Jim, where can we find out more information about you?
Let me preface this by saying, please don't look at his gallery and then look at mine afterwards.
Yeah. Take our links, me and Jim's links first, and then go to Somerstein's link.
Because mine won't be worth it. But anyway, I'm at JimWatkinsPhoto.com, and you can see all my social media platforms linked right there.
Right. And also, same as Jim, look at mine first. Go over to
we don't want to follow him.
Right. Don't follow that. So recasper.com is where we're going to find all of my portfolio, my galleries, all of my blog posts and workshops that I have coming up. But more importantly, go and check out streetpx.com. That's where you're going to find all of our previous episodes, all of the links, all of the show notes, more information to find out about our guests, and sign up and subscribe to our newsletter. From there, you'll get access and updates on future guests and events that we have coming up. Additionally, if you do enjoy our show, we do appreciate anything that you can give. So if you head over to patreon.com/streetpx, where do you give $1, $5, whatever you feel comfortable with. Every bit of money that you give to Patreon goes right back into this show, helping us keep the mics hot and the bandwidth flowing, and bringing in spectacular guests like Steve that we had here today. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you very much. It was an honor.
I'm glad that there are groups like you around to promote good art and good culture.
We try our best.
The base foundation of what Street PX is about is to expose our listeners and our audience to the magnificent photographers that we meet, along our way.
That's right.
And to all of our listeners out there that I just noted, thank you for sticking with us through this show. Thank you for listening to Street PX, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye.